Governor Draško Slaveski, Governor of the National Bank of Northern Macedonia. One further, one further, yeah. Only one. Then we have May Albunaga, first sub-governor from Central Bank of Egypt. And Sabine Lautenschläger, supervisory board member at the Commerzbank AG. Please come. Yeah, a wonderful good morning to all of you. I hope you enjoyed the opening. And I think the opening gave us a wonderful segue into this conversation as well. So I'm really looking forward to this. But let me maybe start by telling you where the idea for this panel actually came from. Is everything has, okay, we can always talk about gender. No? It's obvious, it's important, and it's high on our agenda. But sometimes there are concrete situations that cause an idea. And this time, it was simply a travel. When I traveled to the Pacific, it's not so long ago, maybe half a year, we traveled to Samoa, among others. Yeah? And I had this great opportunity to spend time with Governor Atalina, who many of you know. Atalina was actually supposed to be on this panel, but she couldn't make it. But it's actually an idea that came out of a conversation over dinner. Because Atalina said to me something very interesting, and I may paraphrase it perhaps not in the very one-on-one correct way, but it was, the gist of it was, there's a lot of talk about gender and inequality, but we have also good examples how things can work. And she was actually referring to Samoan villages and talked about how the power structures in Samoan villages look like. Namely, that for centuries or even longer, women play a decisive role in these villages. So on the village level, obviously, there is a gender issue that looks different from, as she said, when we look into our society, into the parliaments, into the banks, into the society as such. But on the village level, we still have structures that have persisted for so many years, where women play a very important role in decision making. I found that quite inspiring and said, look, why don't you bring such a perspective to the GPF? Now she couldn't make it, but we still wanted to have this panel. And we wanted actually to drill down a little bit on these issues. Now, as my colleagues here could see on the session brief, I mean, when you look back in history, ancient civilizations to modern economies, when you look along the timelines, women oftentimes have been architects of progress, no? And women oftentimes also in some cultures, many cultures, have been seen as the embodiment of creation, responsible for healing and wisdom, symbolized by figures such as goddesses. One of them is Isis in ancient Egypt, where women's roles were foundational. When you look into Hinduism, where we see women as nurturers. Hinduism as a religion that worships goddesses as a feminine divine, symbolizing both protection and destruction of the evil. And I could go on, and I'm pretty sure out there you give me more of these references from other cultures. But the surprising and for us sometimes sad part is that at the same time, history tells us a story of exclusion of women. Yeah? Even more and even accelerating, interestingly enough, when societies become industrialized. And what concerns us around these tables is, of course, that the financial system shows structural deficiencies that mirror exactly that societal exclusion. The good news is, and we have heard about this morning, the tides are shifting. We have the DENARA action plan from 2016. We do have a lot of progress under gender inclusive finance. And we have also good news from the Global Findex. And we have a lot of country examples, even here on the panel, I think we can share of what is actually also going on out there. Now, bridging the gaps I'm talking about is not only a matter of equity, but a driver, as we believe, of inclusive economic development. No? And we are often referring to this McKinsey Global Institute estimates that have told us a couple of years ago that advancing gender equality in labor markets could add up to 12 trillion to global GDP by 2025. It's an enormous number. No? And we also know that there's evidence that shows us when women participate more fully in economic activities, households invest more in children's health and education, and communities become more resilient. That means women's increased access to jobs and livelihoods through financial inclusion contributes not only to economic growth, but also to a broader social and intergenerational development. And against this background, I think this power panel now wants to explore how financial inclusion can actually serve as a catalyst for women's economic empowerment and inclusive growth. And the tricky questions to my regulators here is, should financial regulators, when you see this really big picture that I have just painted, should financial regulators go beyond the traditional playbook to address structural inequalities of this kind? Can financial systems reflect not only efficiency and stability, but also equity, empathy, and empowerment? Is that possible? Should it be like that? And of course, that comes, and this is actually, I have a couple of questions here, but actually, I could just throw one question at you, and that would be, have we done enough? But I will paraphrase this question a little bit later. Let me maybe just introduce this panel here, and I called it a power panel, and it is a power panel. When you see the individuals we have on this panel, it's a panel that is diverse in terms of regions, in terms of background, but it's also very diverse in terms of really the individuals who are here. So maybe I start on my very far end. Sabine Lautenschläger, she is sometimes with us here. She likes to be with us. Her background is she has been the vice president of the Deutsche Bundesbank. She has been in the board of the European Central Bank not too long ago. I visited her once, maybe just before COVID, and she got very excited about financial inclusion, and I think that's why she is still following us. And nowadays she is on the board of the Commerzbank, but also a non-executive board member of the Dubai Financial Services Authority, if I'm not mistaken. We have Governor Zalewski, who is a former Minister of Finance from Northern Macedonia, also other ministerial roles, and has now been recently appointed as the governor of the National Bank of Northern Macedonia. We have May Al-Bunaga with us, first sub-governor of the Central Bank of Egypt, a true champion in inclusion, in gender inclusive finance. I think 26 years of background in the central bank, and I think also among the 50 most influential women globally. Is it? So you have people here who are great. Yeah, to expand on the power, I may say a dear professional friend, Rogério Zanamela, a true champion in AFI, governor of the Banco de Mozambique, and a very interesting individual because he has seen many sides in his professional life, including 18 years of IMF profession and now fighting for inclusion in Mozambique. I'm not saying that IMF is not fighting for inclusion. I'm sorry, that could be misunderstood. But I think you have seen a lot, and we are so grateful that you're with us. And then, of course, Governor Johannes, who is with us here, Governor of the Bank of Namibia, but also occupying various roles in the Namibian financial sector, also in the banking sector, with a long history, and of course also sitting on various boards still. No? So I think this is the power panel. Yeah, and I think this is enough of an introduction. We have, in total, we have 90 minutes. I will try to invite you later for a round of questions or comments from the audience, but at this stage I would like to kick off with the first question, which is very related to what I said earlier. Have we done enough? But let me paraphrase it, Governor Johannes. The question really is about the role of the regulators, against the background of what I have said. No? Should financial regulators remain neutral? Should they be neutral observers? Or do they have a moral and strategic imperative to actively shape women's economic futures? Where is the line between mandate and moral duty? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alfred, for a very provocative opening question. Let me state in no uncertain terms that neutrality in the face of systemic inequality is not neutrality. It is complicity. Let me explain what I mean if I say that it is complicity. Because we can't be neutral. Financial inclusion embodies economic justice. Financial exclusion institutionalizes effectively poverty. If you don't include women or youth or disabled people, you institutionalize poverty. It is thus important for us as regulators that to be impactful and meaningful and to promote genuine economic empowerment, we need to include those groups that are excluded. If you look at Africa, access is different for men and for women. According to a recent study by the IMF, in sub-Saharan Africa, 35% of adult women have got deposit accounts, as opposed to 60% for men. So you can see there is work for us to do. At the Bank of Namibia, we made conscious choice to move beyond the traditional regulatory playbook, and we did so with some strong constitutional backing. Not only in Namibia, but throughout on the continent and many other countries, women have traditionally suffered severe discrimination, and they need to be encouraged to participate fully and play an equal role in the economy. In Namibia, as regulators, we said our mandate for price and financial stability is incomplete if our population, half of our population, that's women, are not included financially. So that's very important that we cannot be neutral. In our case, it's very interesting. If I give you some statistics, and it has happened by design. If you look at the president of the country, the president is female. The vice president of the country is female. The Speaker of Parliament is female. The Minister of Finance you've seen this morning is female. 9 out of 9 out of 16 cabinet members, if you exclude the Attorney General, are female in the cabinet. And if you look at our commercial banks, 2 of our leading commercial banks are led by women. One of them is sitting there in the 3rd row. So if you come to the central bank, more than half of the executive team are female. So this is a very, very deliberate that's a very deliberate, intentional to really get to that point. Regarding to financial inclusion, the current area of interest, female inclusion in Namibia has increased to close to 80%. The figure is actually 79.8. So let's say close to 8%, surpassing male inclusion at 76%. And that's supported by the Namibian financial sector strategy. How did we get it right? There was a new we had a financial sector strategy where we drove as a country financial inclusion. That was from 2011 till 2021. This morning you heard the minister say, we have launched a new one, financial sector reform, with our new strategy that's 25 to 2035. So Alfred, if you ask where is the line between mandate and moral duty, I would argue there is no line. Our moral duty is our mandate to create financial systems that effectively serve all citizens as mandated by our Constitution. So let me stop there. So it's very deliberate. Get women, our future is female. I hope we can get from women policies that's going to include not only female, but every citizen in the country.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. This is, let me just capture. You said we can't be neutral. I understand Namibia is doing well. And I also understood there is no line. Our mandate comes with a moral duty. I just want to keep that for us because that's important for the further discussion. And I also wanted to keep that one point that you mentioned on female leadership. Yeah, because that's something that we are also going to address in this panel. The question will be, does female leadership make a difference in this regard? But we can come back to this. Let's come back to the actual question, which is on the neutrality. Should there be neutral observers, or do they have a moral and strategic imperative to actively shape women's economic future? Should the regulators actually do that? May, as an influential woman, we are looking forward to listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alfred, for the wonderful introduction. And I think regulators do not have the luxury for neutrality anymore. We live in a world where women exclusion has become a systemic failure, leading to poverty. So many studies, as you mentioned, have indicated that including women in the power force will boost GDPs with trillions. So is there a thin line? I agree with Governor, there is no thin line. Our approach at the Central Bank of Egypt was to strike a nice balance, to mandate while doing moral suasion. So just to give you an example, in 2018, we mandated the collection of sex disaggregated data. That was a solid mandate that we had to do, to be able to identify gaps and measure progress. That was something that was a very solid mandate that we could not deny. Another softer mandate was the putting 2 women on boards of banks. And this was never penalized by us. It was taken as a direction whereby we don't want to face quotas, the problems of quotas that is always discussed, yet it's always in the inspection reports of the banks. We mandate products. So we've issued the simplified KYC account for the informal society for the women. We call it the economic account. And it has collected around 400,000 accounts in a couple of years. What can we do better as regulators? So I think the way we assess and the way we measure should change. I've heard you say winds of change. So regulators have to change the way they assess and the way they measure things. So we were looking with the Women World Banking at a tool for the banks to do self-assessments. And we had all the banks in Egypt do the self-assessment. Results are not out yet, but I would take this to gender audits to make sure that institutions institutionalize gender into all their procedures, policies, HR policies, in their budget. And gender audits would initially start as a voluntary self-assessment and then mandated for the internal audit people to do those gender audits. And eventually, I would ask our on-site supervisors to do that. What will it help? It will give us a new baseline to measure. We have to start anew. So I don't want to take longer, but I would say, let's use our power as regulators to push this mandate and to use the regulations to spark a revolution and become a force for liberty. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just taking notes. So basically, you're saying we don't have the luxury to be neutral. There is no thin line. You're confirming, Governor Johannes, and you're also talking about pushing the boundaries with your power as a regulator. And you have given an example of like gender audits. Yeah? So that's interesting. Now, Sabine, how does that sound to you from your end? I mean, obviously, where we are coming from, we have actually high degrees of financial inclusion. I don't think we talk so much about gender inclusive finance. Aha, okay, here you go. Please go ahead.
Okay. First of all, many, many thanks for the invitation. It's always a pleasure, yeah, to join and to look at a country, you know, from inside, how much and impressive it changed and is on the way to financial inclusion. So I was very impressed, and I got a little bit at a loss, you know, after this opening ceremony, what I can advise to do, because I'm pretty sure you are far ahead. Yeah. Not much to advise to. But I was invited to disagree. I know that Alfred always invites me to disagree. Yeah, I'm the spoiler here. Yeah. I would answer your question, it depends. First of all, Alfred, I disagree that we have a financial inclusion in Germany or in Europe for women. I think there's still a lot to do. The rejection rate with regard to loan approvals is much higher for women than for men.
Okay.
Yeah? So there is still things to do. We have, for sure, I think, a legal system which caters for equity, yeah? But am I impressed with the diversity, the gender diversity on management level? Not at all. Namibia is much further ahead than we are. Mm-hmm. Yeah? So there is a lot to do still in Europe. But coming back to financial inclusion. So why do I say it depends? I fully agree that a supervisor, that a regulator, that a central banker should always act morally, ethically correct. I fully agree as an economist, yeah, that we need to contribute and need to foster independence, financial independence of women, because it will, I mean, it's economically, it's a fact, sensible. Yeah, you do not even need to have the moral part in it. It's just economically sensible to have financial independence. Women. What do we need for this? You can for sure do more as a regulator within the framework of your mandate. I'm a lawyer. I have to admit that I like mandates, and I do see some dangers when you move beyond your mandate, because usually you get hit on your hands, you say in German, when, you know, it gets very political, when you move into political spheres. But we can do something, and we can do something without giving this idea of a preferential treatment to women. I will ask this panel here, do you think that data about, for example, defaults and loan losses with regard to loans given to men and loans given to women is tracked separately? Do we have an idea, a real idea, why women applying for loans are rejected? How much losses they produce for a bank? My guess is it would be much wiser for a bank to give loans to a woman than to a man. Yeah? So for me, this would move then, if you have enough data around that, into not a preferential treatment, but a risk-orientated treatment in risk-weighted assets calculation, for example, when you are talking about capital requirements. When you look ahead and your law gives you the possibility to push for more women on management level, I mean, I'm a fan now, only for the last 10 years, I have to admit. Before that, I was of a totally different opinion. I'm a fan now of a quota, I have to say, because the first 50 years of my life, I believed that we can do it without quota. The last 10 years, I changed my mind. I think we need quotas for women to get in all management levels. Yeah, and you see, the women are giving applause. And what we need the most is not something what the regulator, I think, can deliver. That is something what the government has to deliver. That's a legal environment. Just thinking about inheritance law, that women are allowed to inherit. I don't know how it is in Namibia, but I know that in some countries on the world, women cannot inherit. And I think that is a very important issue, so the legal environment. And what we even need more is stronger, more confident men. Because if you do have a confident man, he will not be afraid in front of a confident and strong woman. Yeah, and well, I mean, don't laugh. If men are doing the laws, and I'm very happy to hear that in Namibia there are so many women in a decisive position, But when men are doing the laws, when they are the judges, when they are the lawmakers, etc., then we need sufficient amount of men who are strong enough to like to have a strong woman next to them. So it depends. I would not like a regulator to ignore risks. I would not like a regulator to close the eyes when loans come in which are more risky, but I would rather like to have an acknowledgement that women need some support, probably by programs, and I heard this from Namibia, excellent programs in supporting women so that they get more loans.
Okay, well, thank you, Sabine. This is a good answer. No, I mean, I think you are really drawing the line where you see the risks. You're not talking about preferential treatment, and you're also bringing in the role of the government, which is important, meaning that what we often discuss around here, that central banks cannot do the whole job. Yeah, so it's a broader task. So, well, that actually, almost encourages me to add a bit to the question, Rogerio. When we look at your experience, and especially in Mozambique, what we have seen, I think we have seen tremendous progress over the past decade. I mean, you have shared with us recently a 60th anniversary in Maputo. It was very impressive to see how far the country has come. Now, if you have to answer the question on the neutrality, what would be your response? But maybe you can also go already a little bit into this question, what does it actually take to design a financial system that mirrors women's realities, not just their transactions, but also their aspirations, their constraints, and their contributions. Maybe you can add on this as well. Thank you, Rogerio.
Hello. Good afternoon or good morning. Good afternoon to everyone. So, being my first introduction, I will be quickly want to express the Bank of Mozambique gratitude and my own gratitude for the opportunity to be here. We thank AFI, the people of Namibia, the government of Namibia for an exceptional hospitality and the opportunity to be here in such a beautiful, really beautiful country and the beautiful people of Namibia. With that being said and addressing the question that has been raised by my good friend Alfred. I've been 9 years as governor of Central Bank of Mozambique, and before that I spent almost 3 decades at IMF, and so traveling different parts of the world. And I need to be honest, my first introduction real to these issues came from AFI. And with my background from IMF back then, things have changed there. There was nothing that could have led me to embrace or even having awareness of financial inclusion issues. I remember when I joined the bank at the time, I think they had scheduled a mission that was supposed to come enough, and I think they were concerned, I believe, at that time that whether that mission will take place or not, because a different governor has come, coming from the IMF with a different background. So maybe we may have to, relocate. I remember he's there. You can acknowledge he came and he visited us, and he said, we just want to make sure that, we have delayed because we didn't know how to handle it. And I said, yes, we have changed the government. We didn't change our commitments. And not because I knew much about it, but it also has respect to my predecessor. I had taken a principle. If decisions that my predecessors have made, it was not up to me to challenge them first, even before I even understood that. So I was committed. I said, don't worry. Whatever decisions and commitments that we have made, they will be honored fully. And we did that. So it was good for me because that became an opportunity for me finally to be engaged to these issues. It was an eye-opener, and we embraced, we organized, and my interests really come from that. Now, addressing the question, regulators and policymakers have a lot of power. You really have to understand that. And, of course, the question, how do you exercise that power? And I've seen at the central bank, can you be neutral and injustice? Then you ask your question, what do I want to achieve? Do I want to achieve substandard results? Or do I want to achieve higher and higher levels of development, of well-being in our society? Then we realize, wait a minute, if I'm going to uplift, if I'm going to do something to achieve those higher goals, and you have a significant part of your population in our society, women are a majority, even in statistics, then if the majority of those people are not part of that process, then you are shooting yourself not in just one foot. I would say you're shooting yourself in both feet. Real. You cannot it's not a question of walking. You just don't move. And then the question, how do you do that? Because when you have low levels of financial inclusion in a country like us and some others, how do you address specific issues of gender where men too feel financially excluded? Can you openly say, well, from now on, I am going to have policies clearly geared to address female issues? You can be sure if you do that, you're going to have a backlash. There will be resistance. There will be sabotage. You may even have faced lawsuits because you're not going to find a law, you don't have the mandate, you don't have the legislation, you don't have anybody to support you. You'll be alone. If you are alone, you are in trouble, no matter how good are your intentions. Then you can say, wait a minute, there are something I can do to design products, to design service delivery, that even without talking about gender issues, knowing that the majority of people who will benefit from those decisions, from those regulatory actions, from those decisions by being a policy maker will be women, then I will achieve the results that I want without having to challenge anybody or challenging the system. So that's more or less the kind of pathway that we have been doing in Mozambique. We have taken a lot of initiative, even at the central bank, which, quote unquote, there is nothing that talks about gender or women's and so on, but if you dig down deep, that is there, because behind it, the biggest, the largest group of beneficiaries of those decisions will be female, because are the most excluded one. That's what it is, So, and more important than that, how do I see regulation? Sometimes we underestimate. That's the area where we can achieve quick wins without confronting anybody. You have the power, you can exercise, you have the power to exercise flexibility, and then you say, well, let me use that power to achieve quick wins. I can see results. Other areas are more difficult because it takes some time to get results. But through regulation, in designing the right product and service, then you can see changes happening. We have seen in terms of the accounts, we have seen in terms of interoperability. One of the things we saw, for example, for a long time, the indicators, although of the gap, female, male, was stable for a long time. But the indicators of also access, they were not moving. At some point, they get stuck. But quickly we noticed, once we address issues of interoperability, access, use, just skyrocketed very quickly. And that brought itself other groups, mainly women's. They came to benefit. The gap shrunk to significant levels, almost more than half. We say, wait a minute, small things like that. It took us 5 years to come with truly effective interoperability. But the results of that, it brought financial inclusion, viewed in terms of access, also in terms of use, in terms of mobile money networks, almost to near 100%. In that process, it brought women who were far behind men to almost be in an equal position of men and men. The gap shrunk to significant level. So there are many things we can do. We cannot be neutral, but depending on the country-specific context, you have to find a way to exercise that flexibility, that judgment to get quick wins, quick results. I'll stop here on that question. Now,
thank
if
you.
you want, I can continue on the next, or I'll dash it later on. It's up to you.
No, wait.
Okay.
Wait. Because that one is so important, what you said. First of all, I do see some commonalities between you and Sabine, obviously. What is quite interesting for me, the way you put it, the actual overall situation that you have in the country with a high financial inclusion gap does not allow you to focus explicitly on women, although the gap might be even higher, but the data doesn't even tell you. So that's a very interesting situation. And what you are saying is smart policies, smart solutions will drive women's financial inclusion anyway. But I'm sure there are many people in the room who will have questions, because that sounds, that's provocative now from my side, but that sounds almost like, so are regulators then gender neutral? They just do the right thing and women will follow? I mean, I would like to leave it at that point. No? But that question might come in the open. Governor Slaveski from Northern Macedonia. For us, of course, it would be interesting to learn, first of all, what is your view on the neutrality? But secondly, also, does Northern Macedonia do enough in terms of bringing in women into formal financial services? And I would suppose in your context, we are mostly talking about the quality and the usage dimension, but perhaps you can share a little bit from your end.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Hanig. First of all, many thanks to the host, Bank of Namibia, for this excellent event. Statistically, I'm in the last third of my life, and if it had not been for this event, maybe I didn't have any opportunity to come in this part of the world. Second, the opening ceremony, besides being impressive, the speakers, I think, provided a very good pretext for this panel. And I think they said it all, except mentioning women. And it's our role now to, let's say, give a focus. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been studying economics for 50 years now, 50, and I've been teaching economics, standard economic theory and policy for 40 years. By vocation, I'm a university professor, approaching retirement. And despite of that, being a liberal economist, on the occasion of, let's say, congratulating the International Women's Day to my female colleagues, my female relatives, friends, etc., I sent them a quote from Chairman Mao, who reportedly has said that women hold half of the sky for us. I think that he was only partly right, half right. I think women hold more than half of the sky. While they are still holding more than half of the sky for us, it's our role now in terms of the topic of this panel, financial inclusion, to see ways to support them and increase their role in the society in terms of this part of our daily lives. You know, I come from a country which in the last century, during 50s and 60s, was relatively very poor. I remember grandmothers, mothers cutting pencils in half to provide something to write on their notebooks to their school children. I remember in 60s and 70s children lacking milk for their breakfast and being given only tea. But things have improved with development. Why I'm saying this? I believe that women, modern women, have the genes, the inheritance from our predecessors. You mentioned, Mr. Hanning, traditional societies and role of the woman. Probably new technologies and new ways of life, urbanization, speaking in terms of the role of the woman in family and society, have disadvantaged women to a certain extent. And we can see that in, let's say, the figures for labor force participation of women, even financial inclusion. And speaking on the part of the regulator, and your provocative question whether we should remain neutral or be more active in terms of, let's say, supporting women and increasing the financial inclusion in society, I think we can do much, but in a subtle way. I'm not saying this in order not to offend men, not to offend women, because they are capable, provided that equal playing field, provided support and proper incentives, they will rise and use all the opportunities to become equal also in this area, in this field. I think that one, let's say, measurable policy measure to increase financial inclusion of women will be increasing their labor force participation. When women participate in productive activities, don't misunderstand me, everything women do is productive. But in terms of market measures and remuneration, they will open accounts. If we are aware that in the past, they managed to feed their families, to raise the children with few resources, they can do the same and even more in modern societies, provided, as I said, equal footing and settings. So labor force participation and national banks, we have somehow forgotten in the last 3 to 4 decades that we're not in charge only of monetary policy, but when I studied economics 40 years ago, it was monetary and credit policy. So in, let's say, giving signals to commercial banks to, let's say, put great emphasis on women entrepreneurs, we can increase job creation and better inclusion in the society, as I said, in a subtle way. And speaking the second question, you know, we tend to compare by other countries, and now I really am impressed by, let's say, women inclusion in all parts of life in our host country, in Namibia. I'm proud that we also have a lady president of the Republic. My predecessor at the National Bank was a lady whom you have met. Our Minister of Finance is also a woman, female. 64% of the management structure in the National Bank of Macedonia is comprised by women. 70% of total employees in the banking sector, 13 commercial banks, women. Unfortunately, in the private sector, women are underrepresented in the governing bodies. So to, let's say, answer the question that you have, my lady on my right from Germany, women entrepreneurs in Macedonia, and these are figures from our bank, have a very non-performing loan ratio of only 1.54% compared to 2.76% of men who own micro, medium, and small enterprises. And this should be a very good signal to the banks. You know, you provide better conditions to applicants for loans to those who are lower risk. So, not more to say and add to this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So I guess this is part of what you are saying when you're referring to you can do much, you do it in a subtle way. Yeah? But I want to jump on what was said before, May, because you are not only leading in the Central Bank of Egypt on these issues, but you also chair the AFI Gender Inclusive Finance Committee. So how do you see this discussion more from the global perspective at this stage, when you hear, for example, what Rogerio has been saying, what you heard from Northern Macedonia, what Sabine said, Governor Johannes, how do you position this? Are we okay with this approach that we have heard so far? Do we need to do more? What would you recommend through the committee?
Short answer is no. We have not done enough.
Not done enough.
I think we need more and more. Let's take an example. So globally, we have done a lot of strides. The new Global Findex numbers are out. The gender gap has declined to 4% globally. And for the developing countries, it has declined finally from the famous 9% to 5%. But there are still 713 million women excluded out of 1.3 billion that are elderly eligible. So I think we should not obsess on gender gaps. I think gender gaps are misleading. They do not give us the right picture, and they will always persist because as more men come in, women come in. So it is, in my opinion, better to move into measuring progress. So for example, in Egypt, over 8 years, our financial inclusion rates increased in general 204% over 8 years. But for women, 300%. And this is where we want to go. We have been working with the committee on the gender inclusive finance policy model. And really, if I have a quote to say, it's a quote from Abraham Lincoln, who said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree. I will spend 4 in sharpening my axe." I think with the GIF policy model, we have been sharpening our axes. Mm-hmm. We have everything. It's a full-fledged, evidence-based framework that is under your commands to use, and use it to put a lot of policies that instill gender equality. It has everything. It's a compendium of everything. Use it as a work plan. I urge all the AFI members to use it. You have it under your hands. This is a result of my predecessor, my sister Elsie, with the previous committee. And we as a committee are mandated also to move from that into implementation. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, how do we move forward in measuring our progress? I would say we move into impact measurement. Our previous strategy used to measure access and usage only. The new strategy is moving into usage and measuring of impact. Let me give you an example. So our VSLA model, we had a very ambitious target at the time that we have women use 4 transactions on the wallet. And after a while, when we gave them the empowerment, they actually used 8, so double. At the GPF in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh, my slogan in the Egypt story was, "Women times technology equals progress squared." I would say now, times progress to infinity. Use technology. Let's use technology in how we include women. We are currently in Egypt digitizing remittances. We are trying to reach out to the women because all of the challenges that keep persisting in their lives can be reached by technology. Now, the issue is, again, and I think globally, there is a general move towards how we can harness technology for women financial inclusion. People are talking, and we would like to also study something like blockchain-based asset registry to protect property rights, using AI generative models to predict women's behavior and be able to give them the products that they would need. And the most important is using domestic work as a collateral. This would change lives of women, really. So let's try to measure success by how we change lives and how we make dreams come true.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, May. Also, thank you for extending on the practical solutions. Now, I want to come back to the question around female leadership, but before we do that, especially having Namibia and Mozambique with us, I wanted to ask also a bit further, because we have now talked about access mostly for women and employment, job creation, even role in MSME. But there are also other risks, shocks. And Governor Johannes, the question that we have for you here is, how can we build financial resilience systems, that work for women in the face of climate risks, economic shocks, and caregiving burdens at the same time, challenges they disproportionately bear? How do we see this from the regulator standpoint? And I will ask the same question, Rogerio.
Thank you very much, Alfred. I think we have got heterogeneous development levels, and what works for one country is probably not necessarily going to be the answer for the next one. As Sabine said, it depends how we do that. I personally think, let me start probably by giving it a sort of a context that the World Economic Forum did a study now this year around gender gap analysis in April, May. And they came up from the work that's been done. Namibia is #1 in Africa. Rwanda used to be #1. So sorry about Soraya. And Namibia is #8 now globally. And you know, if you look at the Nordic effect, Nordic gender effect, and if you look at countries like Sweden, Norway, Finland, and they are providing equal opportunities. They are the leaders in terms of equal opportunities. If men start designing policies for women, unless you are intentional, I believe, Ineshma Sabine believes in quotas, I believe you need to allow women to make policies for women. So that's probably the first one. Then the second one is we need to rethink the entire thing. So how do we reimagine policies, practices that could work for women? You talk about smart solutions and smart regulations, perhaps. I said to my colleagues at the Bank of Namibia, we need regulations, but we don't need too much regulations. If water is too clean, there will be no fish to catch. So we need to make sure how we manage that. So how do we ensure that there are so many barriers for women? You know, from the traditional cultural roles that have been assigned to women, mostly domestic work that they need to do. In this day and age, there's a barrier that one cannot ignore. Collateral and property rights, you know, there's things that we need to look at. You know, when banks look at the economic profile of women, you know, sometimes they will say this is a misalignment between the economic profile and the commercial objective I have got. So there's a tension in as much inclusion is something that's desirable. There is a tension around sustainability. You know, I would like to include those women, but you know, is it commercially viable for us to, in a country like Namibia, or should we use different tools like digital tools to include women? There's low financial literacy levels, particularly in rural communities. Those are barriers that are in the way of including women that we have got. So to overcome this, what we have decided to do in our 2035 transformation strategy is to really have targeted initiatives to try and include women. Unless you do that, it's going to be very difficult. In Mozambique, it probably works to just do it for everybody, and by the way, indirectly women will benefit. But in our case, given the cultural difference that we have got, you have to be intentional about including women to get some successes that we have got. So that is what our financial transformation strategy is trying to address at this stage.
Well, thank you so much. Well, I mean, very interesting, no? Targeted intentional versus subtle and smart. I think we keep this, even for our discussion, I like that. Rogério, Mozambique is a country that is often hit by natural catastrophes, including the cyclones. And I don't have any data, but I can simply imagine that women, again, are among the most vulnerable populations when these catastrophes kick in. So how do you build financially resilient systems, financial systems? Is that a role that the central bank see, and what are you doing?
Well, yes. I like to, in this topic, we have been hit by a number of global climate-related shocks, devastating in terms of property, human lives, of unprecedented proportion. And the situation is getting, those shocks are more frequent, they're more intense, more devastating, and the question is what to do. I don't want to be here because the question is what you guys did, in a way. How you are handling these things. I found that it is tricky for a central bank as a regulator to be willing to take a leadership role in addressing this issue. You just have to be aware that some issues, no matter how critical, no matter how important, they really transcend the central bank. But doesn't mean you remain passive. And there are other institutions of government, I would say public institutions, that are better suited to deal with those issues. And then the question is, what is my role as an advisor, as in making sure that these institutions actively, effectively play their role? So I look at it as collaboration is very important. Just say, we have to find a way we are not alone. You need to have a framework where you deal with other institutions, whether you call National System of Financial Inclusion or whatever, where you sit, where once your country is hit by a crisis, where you can say, wait a minute, this is our role, but for our role as central bank to be effective, we need you to come on board at the same time. Because otherwise, you will be limited to just bring us money, bring us money, yes. Bring us money. And bring us money, that's not real what is needed sometimes. It will address some of it. So I would say coordinated leadership. Coordinated leadership is critical in this stuff, where everybody comes on board and say, okay, given the critical situation that the country is facing, we as a central bank you can do, but what can you do in your area? What can you do in your area? So that will help, because then you know you are not moving alone.
Yeah.
If you want to move alone, they'll just leave you there. And you're going to fail alone. And then they'll say, okay, you start announcing initiatives. Knowingly that if you don't have support from other public sector policy, you have very limited impact on those issues of climate-related resilience, which they significantly affect women, but you just have to be mindful that you cannot move alone. So I say coordinated leadership, it is very critical in these particular moments. That's where I'll stop.
Yeah. Thank you, Rogério, for coordinated leadership. We take note. This is maybe a good point to come back to the point on female leadership before we open up for the audience. Sabine, if you allow me to share, the first part of what I'm going to share can be found on any document that is perhaps stored somewhere. You were the only female on the board of the European Central Bank. My question is, and that is perhaps something we can elaborate more, how did that feel?
May I add? I was the only female on the board of BaFin, on Deutsche Bundesbank, and on the ECB, so I have quite some experience with being the only woman. I tell everybody that if we are thinking about empowering women and talking about quota, that's why I'm talking about quota. Yeah? I truly believe that it is necessary to have at least 2 women on the board, because otherwise you do not change much. Yeah? You are always the unicorn, looked at, oh, you react different to the same things, because women and men react different, and that's good because it means diversity. Yeah? And diversity is always fostering resilience and stability. So I truly believe you need to have at least 2. I'm delighted, I will be delighted if Germany ever gets to a 50-50%. I mean, we are not very progressive in my country in this area. So I believe, yes, we need more women so, you know, at the end, we are agreeing, nevertheless. I mean, I'm invited here to disagree, but I think we nevertheless agree that we need women to do women policy. I fully agree, but for that, they need to be in power. Yeah. And how do they get in power? They need to be educated. So coming back to Rodrigo's point. Rogerio, I'm sorry. Rogerio's point. We need to ensure that, to understand that a central bank is not alone the player on the market. Yeah, exactly. There needs to be different institutions coming to the same objective, and I mean, we all know that prosperity, that growth, sustainable growth, long-term growth is only possible if there are effective, efficient, sound institutions, public institutions supporting it. So it cannot only be the central bank. Yep. But to be perhaps a little bit nasty, please. Yeah, perhaps we should see the central bank as a kind of infiltration center, meaning to use the central bank as an educator for staff, and to very targeted, try to get educated women and men into central positions in other public institutions. You know, a little bit like perhaps not infiltrator, incubator would be perhaps the better word. Yeah. To use the central bank or the banking regulator for getting more people into other institutions, well educated, and having an idea of economics, and what does it mean for sustainability and for climate change risk too.
Great. Thank you for this. It provokes a bit more, but I just want to maybe say that the role of the incubator, infiltrator, what you mentioned, I think we should not forget, you know, Governor Arif, when we launched the Denarawa Action Plan in Fiji in 2016, I mean, I'm always telling this with pride, because can you imagine that 96% of the regulators from the emerging world adopted an accord that calls for gender-inclusive finance in 2016. I mean, this is a great thing when you think about it, because many of perhaps regulators maybe more based in advanced economies, we would have thought these guys and few girls are perhaps very conservative and they would not even think about that, but it was just the opposite. Because I think we do see this infiltration already partly in the emerging economy. I would say that. But what provokes me, and this is now just the devil's advocate, it's not me speaking, I'm just my moderator role. Why are women better in some topics? I hear that if there are more women in a board or in the management, then there's more openness towards green, towards gender, towards equity. Really? Is that so, Governor Zalewski? Would you agree?
Somebody made a point with confident men and confident women. I think in finance, men can be dangerous because they can be overconfident. And we need more women to, let's say, put them on the ground. So this is not only my opinion, it has been researched and proven. And this is also in service or in line with the resilience of the financial system, the banking sector, etc. I fully agree with my colleague from Mozambique with the elaboration about the climate risks, and I don't have anything to add. But you know, at the meetings, and now speaking of management structure, the meetings that I have internally in National Bank of Macedonia with different departments, sometimes the only man that you can see is the technician fixing the equipment or something else. So we don't have that problem with overconfidence. So humility is, let's say, present there. And this also applies to banks. Women are invaluable there. You might say that they are not risk takers, etc., etc. But you know, having women pointing to risk-taking in finance, both in the private sector, in the national bank, serves the primary, let's say, mandate of the central bank, which is preserving price stability, and in addition to this, financial stability. So, you know, I think that speaking of capacities of both men and women, I do believe that there are no major differences, but sometimes the conditions, the setting, the heritage, etc., unfortunately have disadvantaged the women, and it's our role in modern societies to correct that.
Thank you so much. Before Sabino, you want to come in very briefly, then I open up for one round. But one thing, just for information, I was privileged to moderate a panel in Skopje, the capital of Northern Macedonia, like 9 months ago, where I was invited by your predecessor. And it was interesting. We talked about gender-inclusive finance in the Western Balkans. And I had 5 governors on that roundtable, but they were all female. I found that interesting. There was Moldova, Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Northern Macedonia. They were all female. Yeah? And Georgia. So there is a lot going on in this regard, which I think goes in a very good direction, just for information. But Sabine, you have a short one. I know the question actually went more to you as well, and then I open up. Yes.
2 cents. I do not believe that women are better than men.
Okay.
Do not misunderstand
I've not said better.
I'm just talking about diversity of views and perspectives promote resilience.
Yeah. No, I was more talking about certain topics, because I heard this from other female deputy governors as well, even from advanced economies, who told me, for us it's easier to push certain topics which are not considered as relevant as, by men. Yeah, this is something that we heard. But anyway, I just wanted to clarify. But now we have a possibility to ask questions. Maybe we take two or three for the panelists here, and then we sum it up. Yeah, Khalid is there. Wanted to say something from Egypt. Then I have somebody there. I can't identify, but you will identify yourself later. Please, Khalid.
Good afternoon.
Short question.
I'm Khalid Bassini from the Central Bank of Egypt, and my question is to you. I totally agree with you that on credit lending basis, women are much less than male. But on the other side, banks do not do it intentionally. It's basically there are criteria of lending and whether they are meeting this criteria or not. I'm not defending on the banks, but we understand the real fact that is out there. So there are some solutions like alternative scoring, behavioral scoring, using the AI to assist banks in those kind of evaluating and assessing women rather than the collaterals and the other things that we know. My question to your good self, are there any other solutions that we can provide to the banks from your expertise? Thank you.
Okay, we keep this. That's for Sabine. Any other solutions? Then the lady in the back over there.
Thank you so much. My name is Rita from the National Bank of Rwanda. And thank you, leaders at the panel, for the insightful discussions that you've shared to us. Mine goes to the Deputy Governor from the Central Bank of Egypt. Yeah, that is a very good initiative that you have from the Central Bank of Egypt on leadership. I just wanted to know whether after putting in place all those policies for the financial institutions to make sure that they observe the quotas in leadership for women, have you been able to assess the impact of these senior leaders, female leaders in the management? Have you been able to collect any non-financial data to see whether they are really making impact even to the other junior staff who are female? Or have you been even able to see the journey on how these financial service providers have been able to introduce what we call women-centric products in the sector? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have two questions. Maybe one more, number 3, and then we go. Yeah. Maybe you introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amelia Greenberg. I'm Deputy Director of Cerise Plus SPTF. And my question has to do with the intersection of the financial inclusion sector and culture. Because often when we're working in developing countries and there's gender barriers, they say, well, there's a cultural idea that you don't need to educate women as much, or there's a cultural idea that the man is the head of the household. And when we talk to financial service providers, they'll say, it's not our role to attack the culture, we just provide financial services. But I actually do think there is a role for the financial sector to play in changing some of those cultural ideas. But I don't know if you've encountered that or if you have views on, is it partially at least the role of financial actors to do things that might change cultural perceptions of what a woman's role should be? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sabine, the first one was for you.
Sure. I'm pretty sure I will not add anything to the list you already know, but let me nevertheless list it up. Yeah, apart from the legal differences in some countries, that's, you know, I cannot go to all of the countries, yeah, through all of the countries and list them. Apart from these legal questions, yeah, I do believe that banks, in particular, could collect more data, which is gender separated, you say, I think, at the end.
Disaggregated.
Desegregated, yeah, desegregated, in order to get more knowledge about how loans, you know, given to women compared to loans given to men. You probably do this already in Egypt. Okay, fine. It's much better? Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. Then, as I told you, I truly believe that this problem can only be solved in cooperation with the government. So either you build up guarantee banks where the first loss piece is taken up by the government, and hence a woman can build up a credit history, yeah, at least with one loan, yeah, or you give specific venture capital to women. I mean, in Europe, at least, we are discussing all kinds of funds, private-public partnerships with regard to start-up financial innovation firms. I'm pretty sure there are these kind of venture funds for women too, and why not use these kind of private-public partnerships? Yeah. And then I truly believe that credit officers in banks need to be trained differently. Yeah, they need to have a more medium and long-term view on the business areas of a bank. Yeah, it's not only about the moral obligation and the society as such, but I truly believe that banks could fare much better if they were to cater more for women they would open up new business areas which would help them to increase revenues, turnovers too. But yeah, I mean, you all heard it, digitization, these are the typical things. I have no other solution.
Well, thank you so much. May, the second question went to you, please.
So at the level of the central bank, the percentage of women is about 35%. Of course, it decreases while you go up in the level, and it increases down there. It's very typical of a Middle Eastern country, of an Islamic country. So when we mandated the women on boards for our financial institutions, and over time we have come to realize that they cannot find these women. They don't know where to find them. So what we have done is actually create a repository at the universities with all leaders from different backgrounds, not necessarily financial background, and start the repository while they are at middle management, so that talent is mapped and progress is identified. Now, it's a work in progress. It started first with a repository for the leaders so that banks can pick and choose from them. Yet, the next step would be for the middle management to choose from them. Having said that, we have not done a full-fledged impact assessment, but what we have done is an impact assessment when it comes to women in business and how they become when they lead. We have a saying in Egypt, give them your hand, they eat your arm. And this is what they do really. You give them the empowerment bit, they fly. So we have so many examples and so many cases that I can share with you, from the person that even a very educated girl that came from abroad, from the US back to Egypt, wanting to do a paddle courts, and was unable to get finance because she did not have a credit history nor collateral. And we put her through our Nilepreneur, this incubator that took her from this idea to build with her case. And now she has about 16 courts, and one of the bankers adopted her. So many cases that show that once you empower women, they tend to have this leadership in their blood. Why? And going back to your question, Alf, because women have empathy. There's so much empathy. When you have empathy, you kind of want to include everybody. So they work better when it comes to collective work and including people around.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's your applause. Quick answers from the two governors here. Do the central banks have a role in breaking down cultural barriers? Governor Zawabab and Rogero, please, Governor.
It's a very difficult one. I think as a central banker, probably the first thing you need to do is stay in your lane. So, but if your mandate allows you that you have got a developmental role, your primary responsibility as a central banker, in our case, is price and financial stability. But we have got a section in our law that says you can get involved in the economic development of the country. And if you see there is a case for getting involved, then you probably need to consider, but the statistics that I've given you so far in our case is, it seems that we are winning this thing, particularly in the formal economy. And we need to allow women to make laws for women and see how best we can take female inclusion to the next level.
Thank you. Rogero, does the bank have that role to break down the barriers?
I think yes, there is space to do that, but again, not alone. Because we don't have that in our institutions. I mean, traditionally, there are institutions that are predominantly male-dominated in terms of staffing, I'll say overall in cultural in the institution.
Yeah.
And the question is, how do you then deal with that? That cultural barriers that was raised there in a way to mirror the behavior, the attitude, and the staffing and the leadership of the Central Islanders Bank, and the question how you deal with that. My preferred approach is to say, well, first awareness, really. Because there is still resistance. You know, it is we talk, but the bottom line, people, they still don't see it as an issue. They say, what's wrong? Why do you call cultural barriers? That's the way things are. But then you can say, well, I mean, that things are, but there are problems. Because if that's the way things are, it means we will be permanently lagging behind in terms of achieving our goals. Because what we have now, because of cultural barrier, doesn't mean it's not acceptable. And people say, oh, wait a minute, it's not acceptable. But then, if you're going to, but to bring that requires awareness. You need to be educated. And you will not find that in a central bank, quite frankly. You need to bring out the disciplines from outside. People who can come, sit with us, educate us, open our minds, provoke us on some established norms. Because we all have those established norms. If somebody does not provoke you, and to say, wait a minute, do you see the consequences of what you are doing? Keep things the way you are, then you'll keep doing things the way they are. You can achieve price stability, you can achieve financial stability, but the question, is it enough? Can you do more? What problem financial stability, price stability is created or is not rose? Then for that, you need some times of help from outside. Where that expertise rely. People on ethics, people on ethics, sociology, anthropology. These are the people who can bring that approach so that once you are aware, because it's a risky world, let me be honest about it. I've been testing myself. It's a very risky world because you say, wait a minute, I see the problems, I want to address them, I want to do things, but things also can be wrong and it can unravel. If then they unravel, there will be a backlash. Then if I want to do more, so you need to have to move in relatively, I would like to call safe grounds, but at least you need to be informed about what you are doing so that once you're informed, you move, you don't move alone. That's where I will, that will be my contribution.
Thank you. We are supposed to sum up, so we have just a couple of minutes, but let me just add as one example that I found quite interesting that goes a little bit into this direction. I'm sure our colleagues from Peru are in the room, or at least one of them, but I heard that, for example, in the Peruvian, our member institution there, the leadership has actually introduced courses for those ones, the female staff who have been affected by domestic violence at home. And this is something that is regularly done in the institution, obviously quite successfully. So there are things that, I see in the network that are in this regard actually quite interesting. Before we sum up, I would like to start with Sabine. That makes my job then easier. I end with Governor Johannes. If you just give me in 30 seconds what you learned, what's your main takeaway from today?
First of all, again, I'm very impressed how much progress was done. I'm very impressed about Namibia and how many of the tools you use in order to get more financial inclusion. The second is I think here is enough awareness, sufficient awareness that we need to move on all kinds of fronts, not only on one front, on financial regulation, but on all different kinds of areas.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabine. Governor Zalewski?
Not only from this panel, but from what I've heard the day before and this morning, as a person coming, an official from the part of the world where I come from, Southeast Europe, I think that so far we have been turned to the West in order to, let's say, learn about their experiences, but I now see that we can learn much from the country's experiences like Namibia.
Thank you. May, what do you take away?
So I don't want to repeat what has been said, but really I have to commend Namibia for the achievements, really. In general, I think through this network, to my colleagues, what I hear and how I hear them speak about gender, we have great momentum. We have, and let's use it. There's always room for progress, and there is always room to make things better. I would say, let's work together again towards more gender equity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Rogerio.
Yes, first, I'd like to join others, in commending Namibia real for remarkable achievements in financial inclusion. There's a lot to be learned from that experience, from that journey. Clearly, it was not an easy one. So you have a lot of things to be proud. So congratulations, congratulations. So really, a hands up. Let's clap real to it. Now, what I have learned, I think, what I have learned, or what I reinforced more than learning this way, was the importance of having a holistic approach to those issues.
Fantastic.
It's not just touching that. Holistic approach in the sense that, financial inclusions, using economic terms, they have a supply side and there is a demand side. It's not enough to have results in demand where you have more use and so on, but you have to make sure that, if you're going to leverage more demand, you have to have real also do something on the supply side, like designing the right products, the right service, the right credit, the right insurance, the right pension system, and so on. Because that will trickle to the demand side. So this holistic approach, it's critical to take financial inclusion issues, including gender issues, to a higher level.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rogerio. Governor, what do you take
Firstly,
away?
thank you to my fellow panelists. You have been very kind and generous of your commitments. Thank you very much for that. What did I learn? Probably one, exclusion institutionalizes poverty and inequality. Exclusion. Central banks have got a role to play in partnership with entities that have got the expertise to consider inclusion of women and to break the cultural barriers. That's what that's my takeaway.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Governor. I think we have come to the end of another highly thought-provoking power panel. I'm not summarizing, but I think what I can say, there is no disagreement here. I haven't seen any disagreement, although we have a really diverse panel here. So this is great, and I think this is a great encouragement also for the GIF committee, I think, to move forward. Before I end, let me just say, I asked you this question that I got from my 7-year-old daughter, no? I mean, when I did the opening, which I was not able to answer. But you know what? What I'm going to tell her, I don't have an answer. But I need to create an environment to encourage her to continue asking this question. Yeah, isn't it? In this sense, I would like to thank our host, Johannes, Sabine, Gamaselski, May, Rogerio, for a fantastic discussion. And we are now going to break. I think we are going to be taken over by our MC. Thank you so much.